Hello and welcome back to Beyond the To-Do List, a podcast about productivity. I'm your host, Eric Fisher, and in this episode, I'm excited to introduce to you my friend, Michaela Alexis. She's got a brand new book out called No Fear Networking, a guide to building connections for the socially anxious professional. And I've known Michaela for a long time. She's a keynote speaker, a LinkedIn expert. She's a networking coach, but this is a new topic for her. She does not shy away from anything, ironically. That's why it's interesting and fun for me to hear her talk about this topic. There's a lot here, no matter how much anxiety you may or may not have when it comes to networking. And in this conversation, we're talking about redefining networking. We're talking about common misconceptions about networking and shifting it from a transactional thing to a relational thing, how to overcome social anxiety in professional settings, the power of small interactions, because this doesn't need to be hard. You can start small, and just overall learning how to create your own networking style that works for you. So if you've been feeling like you need to polish your networking game, you're going to love this conversation with Michaela Alexis. Well, it is my privilege to welcome to the show Michaela Alexis. Michaela, welcome to Beyond the To-Do List.
I am really excited about this because this is, I think, one of the first times that I've actually talked about this subject in particular.
Yes. I mean, seriously, I follow you all the places, but on LinkedIn, and I see the posts about your new book coming along. And then finally, when I saw what it was and what the title was, I was like, oh, this is
different.
Different.
Even
networking.
It's adjacent to what I normally do, but it wasn't what I pitched, and they came back and they're like, do you want to write this book? And I'm like, I guess. And then as I started to write it, it started to make more sense.
Yeah. Because I never really noticed, you definitely don't hold back in sharing personal and how that applies to everybody when it comes to all the things you're doing. But I didn't think, oh, no, because never have I ever, when I've seen you in person or virtually, have I ever thought, oh, Michaela has anxiety issues when it comes to networking. Never been a thing.
You know what? Make it till you make it, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of it. This has been an ongoing journey for me. This isn't something that started a year ago. This has been since I was 24. I'm 38 now. So that's 14 years of me going from where I was to where I am now. So it's been a lot of work and self-discovery. And I'm really excited to share what I've learned along the way.
Well, and I think this is helpful because, I mean, again, we've talked about networking specifically on this show before. It's a productivity show, and one of the most productive things you can do is work on your network without it being transactional. And how more human can you be than be bold / out there when that is one of the biggest struggles in your life, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that you use the word transactional networking, because I think that when I say networking, that's where most people's minds go, where it's like this, actually, one of the first studies that I came across while writing the book was how networking makes us feel dirty. And it's a study that came out in, I believe, 2021 from the University of Toronto, where they talked about how people would describe how they felt after a networking event. And they would use words that were associated with being unclean. So transactional networking actually does make, not all of us, some of us love transactional networking. And for the record, it's necessary sometimes, right? We have to do what we've got to do, and sales are important. But for the majority of us, it's not our jam. And I have spent a long time trying to find ways to tell people that that's not the only option.
Yeah, it's definitely not, because I will say this. I don't do as well at networking as I should. I'm never as consistent with it. For me to think of what you just did recently, where you did 30 days challenge-wise, and I want you to explain this a little bit, but you talk about something not being your jam. My jam,
your worst nightmare.
Yes.
No, I get it. I listen to you say that, and I'm like, Eric, you're such a liar. Because if we're thinking of networking not as just transactional, you go to an event where there's high top tables and you're standing around the room in uncomfortable shoes and trying to exchange business cards. I actually don't know if that's the status quo anymore. I think that the world is changing so quickly. The people that I actually met at those events aren't actually going to events like that anymore. So I think that people are finding more creative ways to network and finding ways that make sense for them. But my whole goal is to say to somebody like you, like, you can network from your home, you can network from your phone, you can network in the coffee shop. It's like I sound like a Dr. Seuss book right now, but you can really and truly, because if we start breaking down networking to just simply having social interactions, because I believe it's kind of like going to the gym, just show up. Show up. Like, even if you're going and you're spending 10 minutes on an elliptical, that's a workout. But he was an athlete, a former athlete, and he got into this really deep depression after he left the NFL. To get out of that funk that he was in, he got a gym membership and he would show up to the gym and sit there and play crosswords and just sit there staring at a wall. He would do nothing. And he did that for 20 days because in his mind, it was more about building the habit. And eventually he started getting on machines. He started doing more and more. And I think that's where some of us need to begin, right? Especially if we're thinking of people that have social anxiety. The book is called No Fear Networking, A Guide to Building Connection for the Socially Anxious Professional. And social anxiety is a spectrum, right? So there are people like me at certain times in my life where I couldn't leave my house. And then there's people that just struggle getting on stage or speaking on a radio show. There's very specific situations. So if I'm talking more to people that are higher on the scale of social anxiety, my goal isn't to say you need to do more of this, but let's find ways for you to show up in a way that feels more comfortable for you, that you're just kind of pushing yourself a little bit outside of your comfort zone, because I promise you, the more that you work that muscle, the easier it gets. And actually, at the end of that 30-day challenge, I was surprised even with myself how easy it was becoming to ask strangers to take selfies with me versus the beginning of it.
Well, and one of the things that's hard when it comes to this social anxiety, and you even illustrate this well in the book, is it comes out in weird symptomatic fragments. Like some people would say, oh, I can't even go. Others would say, oh, I'll go, but I'll be a wallflower. Others, it's over talking.
Yeah. You know, what's so funny is like, as I was writing this book, I was like, oh, shoot, that's social anxiety. I had no clue. Social anxiety, it affects between 90 to 99% of human beings. So we all have it. It's biologically ingrained in us to care about what other people think of us. If we didn't have that, we would be running around killing each other, saying whatever we want. We have an internal filter that helped us in the past with survival, being part of the tribe, right? So it's a good thing. And actually, when it comes to social anxiety, one of the positives is that people that are socially anxious, that is positively correlated with empathy. So the higher you are on the social anxiety scale, the more likely you are to have high levels of empathy for other people because we care more about what other people think of us. And that does come out in a lot of different ways. For some people, it's, I don't like small talk. You know what that means to me? As soon as somebody tells me that now, I'm like, that's social anxiety, because of that empathy with deeper conversations versus small talk, which is more surface level. So people with lower levels of social anxiety tend to do better with small talk versus the deep conversations. Other things that, you know, in the past, I've had experiences where people thought that I was being standoffish or snobby, where I couldn't look at them in the eye. That was the big thing for me. I felt like danger. But it's because when you have social anxiety and you enter a conversation, your body's going into fight or flight. So what are some of the things that you do when you're fight or flight? You're looking for an exit, right? So those people that, and I've done this in the past too, I'm sure you've done this, Eric, too, where it's like you're talking to somebody and they're looking over their shoulder and you think, oh, they hate me, or they're not interested, or they're trying to escape. And that person, in their mind, they're like, oh my gosh, I want to have this conversation, but I'm scared. My body is in fight or flight. These are safety behaviors. And like you mentioned, under talking is the one that we typically associate with social anxiety, but actually over talking is also associated with that. And I notice that I do that. That's probably my biggest one when I'm intimidated. So it looks like I'm bragging, I'm name dropping, I'm doing all these things. But what I'm actually doing in my brain is, oh no, they looked away. They hate me. They think that I'm not relevant, that I'm not good enough to talk to them. So maybe if I drop this name, then they'll want to keep talking to me. And it has the same effect afterwards, where we sit there for hours and we're ruminating about how bad that conversation went, whether we talked too little or too much, or did these weird safety behaviors that we were trying to control.
Totally. Yeah. It's weird because over time, I've been able to kind of regulate. And one of the components for me is it has to do with, some people think social anxiety and they think shy. They just say, oh, equals shy. They don't go into the like quiet, alone by yourself in another room panic attack that you escaped to go do. And they think the opposite of the word shy is outgoing. That's a spectrum there, but that's a different spectrum than the one that I usually do.
Introversion and extroversion.
Introversion and extroversion. That's exactly it. And so so you've got like this grid, introvert and outgoing and extrovert and shy and all the combinations in between. And once I realized that I am an introvert, doesn't mean I'm shy. It means I recharge by myself. I need to step away.
Fascinating.
Right?
I love that.
And so once I realized that, and I wasn't like running on empty in those social networking situations, because I would be pacing myself.
For you.
Yeah. I've been here for about 20 minutes, half an hour. I've met a few different people. We've chatted. Let me step aside, and it's almost like stepping outside for a smoke, so to speak. But instead it's to get air, real air.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you learned how to pace yourself.
Yes.
I know that my social battery is about 2 hours. And this is true for me, whether I'm at a networking event or I'm talking to a friend one-on-one. I can tell at the 2-hour mark, I just hit a wall and I'm like staring at them and I see their mouth moving and I'm like, oh, shoot, my battery's dead. Right. I love that you learned that. I don't know if you learned it through the book, but that was something that was really surprising for me, to know that there's a difference between being introverted and socially anxious. Mm-hmm. So introversion, extroversion, like you mentioned, has to do with your energy, how you extract energy, how you charge up, all that good stuff. So extroverts, they get their energy from being around crowds and networking and being around, social situations. Introverts, we need to recharge on our own. Ambiverts are interesting. And I think I might actually fall into this category because it really depends on the day, on their mood, on their hormone levels, whatever it may be, where some days they get fired up from being around people. And then other times they are able to recharge only on their own. But that was really important for me because I didn't realize that extroverts could also be socially anxious. If you are extroverted and socially anxious, what that might look like is that you want to go to events and you want to be around people, but you have a fear of being judged, of being rejected. You have the same fears as somebody that was introverted might have. I thought that was really interesting because it's kind of like craving a chocolate cake, but you have an allergy, right? Yeah. And so there's definitely challenges no matter where you fall on the spectrum. Introversion is not the same as socially anxious, although I will say that they are probably highly correlated. A lot of people that are introverts are also socially anxious, but you can absolutely be an ambivert or an extrovert and also have social anxiety.
Yeah. So there's a bunch of different buckets, compartments, whatever you want to call it, that come with this. And it's really helpful to kind of have a level of self-awareness and increase 100%. That for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, it's good to know yourself. It's good to learn these things. And I do recommend the book for anybody that struggles in social situations. Forget networking, just social situations, just to know yourself better. But one thing that I really believe in is get to know yourself. Get to know, like you mentioned, pacing yourself. What does your energy level look like after an hour, 2 hours? Get really curious about where you feel most energized and where you don't, but also take personal responsibility for these things. So what that might look like for me as a speaker is if I know my battery is 2 hours, then I need to figure out, okay, well, I can't go to an event before I'm speaking because then I'm spending at least an hour, spending that social energy when I need to afterwards. So I will go for my talk and then I will stick around for an hour after that. And then I need to go back to my hotel room and take a nap. Right? So know yourself, but also be willing to take responsibility because nobody else is going to do it for you. And yeah, I just think it's so important to also take control and take back that power too, to be able to create these situations that make you feel comfortable.
Yeah, I had a speaking engagement less than a month ago now, and it was the first one I'd had in a while just because I was gearing back up into booking more of them finally. I was so excited, and it was going to happen at 9 a.m. So of course I had all the like, oh my gosh, am I going to wake up in time? Will the flight the night before get me there early enough? Because if something delays and I'm getting in at midnight, I'm going to be, I worked through all that. It was a really good workout mentally and emotionally to just say, hey, what happens, happens. And it's still going to be fine. But then the morning of course, as usual, I woke up super early, tried to get back to sleep and couldn't, and then just said, okay, let's chill. Luckily, I had a room in the hotel where the event was happening, and I knew I was at 9 o'clock. So I went downstairs at about 9:30 something and kind of slowly made my way towards it, kind of avoiding people just to kind of, I got to save my energy for the talk. The talk's the most important thing.
Space.
And then the people that I had worked with to kind of design it for this team and do this for them, saw some of them, chatted politely, and then the setup, and here's where you'll be, and okay, great. And then did it. And then it was great. And then when it was done, mingled in the crowd before the next session was going to start. There are other things that they were doing the rest of the day with their team building stuff. But I stuck around and was there for like a half hour, 45 minutes chatting with a bunch of different people. That. And at that point I was free to do that. But I had to, get that all set up in my head first to make the talk, the thing I was paid to go do, work. I had to deliver the value. Yeah. So that's kind of and it was a good practice run again to get back into that mix of doing it.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because we look at like professional athletes and we don't make fun of them for having a warm-up routine. Like it's obvious before a big game, you need to have a whole routine. And yet when it comes to things that where we need to perform or we need to be our best, we need to feel comfortable. We don't think that we need it. I can tell you 100% that my worst talks and my worst events have been the ones where I didn't do that. And I kind of just pretended like it wasn't happening because that's my go-to is just like, I'll say yes to an event and then I don't think about it until like right before. And then I'm like, panic, right? And those have absolutely been my worst because there's so many things that you can do, even if you're not speaking. Let's say that you're going to an event and you're socially anxious. You're nervous about going to a conference. You could absolutely get there super early. Change your mentality so that you're not a guest, you're not an attendee, you're the host. And there's something about doing that where you think of yourself, especially if you get there early and you just start welcoming people, like saying hello and just act like they're coming to your home. That's something that's been really helpful for me. Look up the floor plan. Again, we got to do whatever we need to do to feel comfortable and confident, right? So if you're going to a big conference, look up the conference center online. Look up the rooms that you're going to be in. Look up the networking space so that you get an idea of the floor plan. Take the 3D tour, right? Like you were like hosting an event there. Get there early so that you can go into the rooms and imagine what it might be like. I even tell people if you're going to a networking event, drive by it. If you're thinking about parking, because you mentioned a flight and all this stuff, obviously you can't take a practice run with a flight. But if you're driving to a location and it's in your city, go and drive. Do a test run like you were getting married the next day, right? A rehearsal. And you drive there and you park your car and you go inside. Nobody's going to know. So this sounds silly out loud, but who's going to know? And also, who cares, right? About you showing up as your best. And for some people, it's just showing up, period. For people like me and you, this is more of a conversation about how can we show up confidently. But when I was in my mid-20s, I couldn't leave my house. So for some of the people that I may be talking to right now, they might not even be thinking about conferences. They might be thinking about going on a coffee date, right? Because I couldn't do that. I couldn't go to restaurants. I couldn't go to any public spaces. And so the same rules apply. You're having a coffee date with an old friend and you're nervous about it. Do a trial run. Go there the week before, park, go in, grab your coffee, sit there by yourself and just picture it. You can do some work, whatever you want to do. But just so that you have an idea of, okay, this is what parking is going to look like. This is what the cafe looks like. This is what I might order, and then that's going to make it much easier when it comes like game day, right? Even if it's just a coffee day, it's still game day. And when I was doing my challenge, like every single time I did something and I realized like that nobody cared. Like, so I always tell people, I'm like, you can do one of two things. You can either walk into a room and like go 1, 2, 3, and so that you're not hesitating and just go up to somebody, or sometimes just go to a coffee shop and just sit there. Because this is the craziest thing that I did during my challenge is that I one day had to work from a coffee shop, and I'm sitting there and I'm like all nervous because I need to take like a selfie of me at the coffee shop working for the day. And I was so uncomfortable doing it, even as somebody that's a creator. And once I finished, I put my phone down and I just looked around because in my head, I was like, it's a spotlight effect, right? Where it's like, oh my God, everyone's looking at me. They're probably snickering. They're going to be pointing their fingers, laughing at me. Two people are in the corner having a drink together. Some girls are catching up and hugging each other because they haven't seen each other in a while. There's a mom that brought in like their little toddler and they're sharing a cookie. Not a single soul was looking at me. And so sometimes it's just about going to these spaces that are social and just looking around and seeing that, yes, you're in your bubble, but guess what? When you're in your bubble, everybody else is too. So not concerned about you because they're so concerned about themselves.
Well, other than saying yes to a 30-day challenge, what are some of these other things that we can start to do to work that muscle?
Yeah, even before the challenge, one of my biggest things was, especially because of the pandemic, you might have noticed this with yourself. When the pandemic hit and we went from seeing people all the time to not having any sort of interaction with anybody outside of our home or our bubble, as they called it, we started to get really weird, right? You would go out and meet somebody and you're like, do we fist bump? Do we hug? What are we supposed to do here? You just felt really uncomfortable. And this made me think at the time, I'm like, there's something here that we have to be doing this thing on a regular basis because it becomes really easy, especially now where you can, mobile order, you can go through drive-through, like you could spend days without having any sort of interaction. And so I made it a rule of mine to have one social interaction with a stranger every single day. So what that looks like, it doesn't mean I have to go out and I have to find a stranger to talk to, but it can be as simple as a sentence, right? Rather than going through the drive-through at Starbucks, I go inside and I order from the barista. Rather than depositing a check into one of those bank machines, I go into the bank and I talk to people. So it's like these little things that may be a little bit more inconvenient, but really set us up for success for that next time that we're going to have a conversation. I just had a really great call with this guy, Rob. So he has this project called Rob's 10,000 Friends. And if you haven't seen it, I'm going to introduce you to him because I think that you guys would get along really well. He has this goal of having 1 hour conversations with 10,000 people.
Wow.
So I think I was like number 6,000 something. I was kind of like a little bit nervous because I'm like, is this like a salesy thing where it's going to be like, let me tell you about my business? He was so chill. He was like a networking Buddha. And I mean it because he just had this energy that was so relaxed. This is somebody that has gotten, I don't know what he was like before this, but he did mention he's like, at first it was really awkward for me and I just got better at it. But, and there's no like, let me tell you about my business and then you tell me about yours. It's literally, hey, let's just talk. Let's talk for an hour and see what happens. He asks so many great questions. He listens so well. He's so genuinely curious when he talks to you and everything feels so casual and calm. And when I left the conversation, I felt energized. And I think that is a testament to the fact that if you can just have a conversation with somebody once per day, you will get to that point of being like Rob, where you learn what are the best questions to ask? What are the questions that are going to open people up so that you're not stuck in like this surface level small, it's hell, isn't it?
Yeah.
When you get into a conversation and you cannot break that ice, it's like you're trying to like, you've got like your sword trying to stab the ice and it's like, it's not happening. And I think we're partially responsible for that because if you go into a conversation and say, oh, hey, Eric, what do you do? Now I've told you inadvertently that the most important thing about you is what you do for a living. And it's not. And that's not where the magic happens. And Rob, one of his favorite questions, because I asked him, I'm like, what are the questions that really bring things out from people? Is that he will learn what he can about the person. So let's say that you're going to interview me. Okay, Michaela, you're a pie. And I know that part of the pie is that you are a LinkedIn trainer. Well, like there's all this other space here. Like what is missing in that space that I'm not seeing? People are begging to be cracked open. And one of the things that I learned during my 30-day challenge is that with social anxiety, we have this fear that we're being a nuisance, we're being annoying, we're bothering people, right? The amount of times that I said sorry, I know I'm Canadian, so I say sorry a lot anyways. But during the challenge, I was like, sorry to bug you, but this, no, sorry. And especially there was one day that I did a challenge where I had to ask 3 strangers a question. And I wanted to make sure that the questions were not like, what's your favorite color? I wanted to ask like real questions that required thinking. And so the first person that I asked was a barista at Starbucks. And I went in and I'm like, sorry. Can I ask you a question? I know I'm being really annoying, but I'm doing this challenge. And one of the challenges is that I have to ask 3 strangers a question. And the question for you is, what's the best piece of advice that you've ever got? And she stopped for a second. And in my head, again, like the amount of times that I realized that my brain was just bullshitting me was like insane during the whole challenge. Because I'm thinking, oh, she's annoyed because like she's also working the drive-through. And she's like, no, I'm not annoyed. She's like, I'm just thinking. I'm trying to think of what to answer. She's like, I think she's like, it's not necessarily a piece of advice, but one thing that I'm always trying to work on is just showing up and not being perfect, right? Just showing up anyways, because I'm always trying to say the right thing and do the right thing. And she just cracked right open. And I was stunned because in my head, I was like, again, being annoying, the person's going to give me a 1-word answer. And here was this person that I didn't know her name. She didn't know my name, but because I had asked her a question and was asking with genuine curiosity, cracked her right open. And after she gave me this really long answer and like was very thoughtful in her response, I'm leaving and I go like, thank you so much for answering my question. And she goes, no, thank you. And I was like mind blown. Because if we as people living with social anxiety can get out of our heads and thinking that we're being a nuisance and people are going to reject us and we're going to fail, and just remember that we're all thinking the same thing and people want to connect. We have a human desire to connect. I think that it makes a lot more space for possibility. Because when you think about, your kids and you think about the people that you've worked for and the people that have been really significant in your life, all of those people came into your life because of choices that you made to interact, right? So it's like, what if you are one conversation away from your next best friend or your next mentor or your next employer? Or, there's just so many possibilities. And I want people to start thinking more about what if and the positives that could come from it.
Well, and one of the things that I have noticed as I've looked back in hindsight is that some of the biggest moments of pivoting or moments that lead to the next chapter of what I'm doing job-wise or relationship-wise come from things I wasn't looking for. Right. And connections I already have.
Yeah, I love that. So that's called spontaneous networking. And I actually love the term serendipitous networking even more because I noticed while I was interviewing people, when I would say networking, they would kind of like do this like kind of face, right? Where they were talking about it. And it goes back to that being transactional and icky and all this stuff. And then I had asked people, I'm like, tell me about a time that you networked in an unexpected place and something unexpected happened. And the opposite would happen. They would light up. So networking for me is not necessarily like seeking out these rooms that you've got to be in. Sure, we have to do some of that in our career. But networking is more about showing up in spaces and being open to serendipitous networking, because those are the best stories. I'm smiling just thinking about going on a plane and having a conversation with the person next to me and them becoming Facebook friends, and they were 50 years older than me, and just so many moments that happened just because I did or they decided to say hello.
Yeah, you have so many stories like that, one, in your challenges, but two, in the book. And talk a little bit about the research and the process of the book, because you interviewed so many different people for this book. And even that in and of itself is kind of a challenge, or potentially a challenge for other people and for you to do the research about this topic for the book.
I know, right? It's like I'm having social anxiety about writing this book on social anxiety. But a lot of people that have social anxiety do much better with structure. And so that's why something like a challenge or an interview, we tend to do pretty okay in those situations.
True.
Because there's a little bit more structure where I know what my role is, you know what your role is. My goal with this was not just to talk to people that were socially anxious, not just talk to people that were the opposite, but kind of a mix of all types of people that were really great at networking and I couldn't imagine them having any sort of social anxiety, to people that were amazing speakers. Speakers were probably the most interesting to me because it doesn't, on the face of it, make a lot of sense that so many speakers are socially anxious. But I don't know if you saw the chapter about all the celebrities and singers and performers that have social anxiety, but there seems to be like a really strong link between them. And it wasn't until I talked to one speaker who also is autistic, and they mentioned that getting on stage, they know what the role is. They know that they're getting on stage and they are there to teach something, and the audience is there to receive that information. She said that the challenge is when she gets off stage and she's talking to somebody and there are no rules. There's no clear roles of this is what I'm going to say and then you're going to say this. And so that was important to me too when it comes to the book, because there's so many of us that are neurodivergent, whether it's ADHD, autism, you name it. And so I want to make sure to include those voices as well, because those are all things that, again, are highly correlated with social anxiety. And part of the reason for that is because there are no clear defined rules of, okay, I've spoken. Okay, Eric, now it's your turn to speak. We've just kind of got to figure it out as we go along. And you can imagine for somebody that struggles with social cues, that could be even more difficult. So it's a mix of just regular people and then also talking to psychologists as well to kind of get the science behind all of this.
Now, we were talking a little bit earlier about the challenge and also people moving. You say that socially anxious people thrive when they can move past small talk. And you were talking about the guy with the 10,000 friends. I think that one of the things that we can do, us socially anxious people, is to have some of those default or bag of questions that do the cracking open. Or, you know, if I were to ask Michaela this one question, she could go on and on and on. And that sets her up to feel comfortable and me comfortable to just listen and then just have it be ping pong back and forth. What are some of those kind of go-tos, or how do you suggest we come up with some of our go-tos?
Yeah, icebreaker questions are great to have. I researched them a lot. There's a couple different ways to approach it. If you're at an in-person event, talking about something that's happening around you, you're at a conference, which speaker has been your favorite so far? Which session? I'm looking at the agenda for tomorrow. What's the one session that I need to attend? You could use your phone. Like if you need your little support, emotional support
props.
Phone, because I do. Yeah, I love having props. You could be looking at your phone and looking at the agenda and just asking people that. Which one do you think that I should? And like show it to them, you know, like, so that's one option. I love Rob's idea of like, I know this about you, but what do I not know about you? He also mentioned talking about kind of connecting the dots, right? So it's like, oh, you lived in this but now you live here. Tell me a little bit about your move. Why did you end up moving from here to here? And that's one of those things that as I've done this challenge, I've been asking more and more, because I think, again, when we're in fight or flight, we forget to ask questions. So get used to asking more questions. I really love the challenge where I had to ask strangers because I needed to shut up. Like I will kind of monopolize conversations if people don't reel me in. And so learning to ask questions and take turns is something that's really helpful. I'm very socially anxious and events like this make me super nervous, but I'm here and I showed up. Hi, my name's Michaela. The reason why I like starting with vulnerability like that is because of Dr. Carol Robbins' 15% rule. So the 15% rule is that in order for me and you to go into deeper conversation, I need to be willing to give you 15% beyond my comfort zone to give you permission to give me 15% beyond your comfort zone. Otherwise, we're going to stay up here. It's very easy for us to stay surface level if I say, hi, Eric, what do you do? Right? Now you can give me your whole pitch. You can read a script if you wanted to. And then it's like, okay, now your turn. And then I read my script, right? It's trying to go off scripted as quickly as possible. For me, my favorite currently is like, I'm socially anxious. Events like this make me super nervous, but I'm here. My name is Michaela. It's really nice to meet you. It's honest. It opens the door. And there's going to be people that are like, okay, cool. See you later. Right.
Yep.
But what if I meet somebody like you and you're like, oh my God, so do I. I get so nervous. I hate events like this. Right. Like, I would so much rather go get a cup of coffee. And then I can say to you, I'm like, oh, I love coffee too. Like, how do you usually take your cup? So I like questions that get to deeper conversation really quickly.
And that one particular statement of social awkwardness, what it does is it almost deflates one of the worst possible scenarios you could be dreaming up in your head, which is, yes, oh no, they're going to find out that I'm socially awkward. Well, you just shot that already. Yeah. Nothing else can go wrong, really.
Yeah. And what's nice is that you might find a point of commonality where the other person is like, oh my God, I feel so awkward too. Right. Yeah. And you don't have to be like, I have social anxiety. You could say like, oh my God, events like this make me feel so awkward. Like, I don't know how you do this. Do you have any tips for me? I like doing that too. It's like, do you have any tips for me to survive an event like this? Right.
Yeah.
But just kind of like opening with honesty is actually when I was on maternity leave and I was really struggling to find people to talk to. I went to swim lessons and I was in the locker room with like getting my baby ready. And I go, the newborn phase almost killed me. Just blurted this out. And like this girl goes, oh my God, me too. And then we started talking about like the newborn phase and, you know, are we going to have another? Are we going to do this again? Like, and it ended up becoming this swim moms chat group. Actually, I just ran into one of them the other day. We hadn't seen each other in a few years. But where we would rent out people's swimming pools, we would get together and go swimming. We like, you know, saw each other every week. But it took that moment of me being like, the newborn phase nearly killed me to open up potential conversations that led to friendships. And there were people that were in there that were probably like, this lady's crazy. Like, why
but again,
you do it?
But again, it's kind of pre-qualifying people. You know, but 100%. It's like, hey, you know what? Yeah. Those aren't my people. These are my people.
Those aren't your people.
You know,
and you wouldn't want to like spend your time trying to get into deep conversation only to realize that that person that you're talking to doesn't want to go deep, because there's a lot of people that love surface level conversations. There's nothing wrong with that, right? We all have our own style of like what we need, where we feel comfortable. And if people don't want to go deep with you, that's totally fine too. But it's more awkward to have surface level conversations and then realize that that person is not your person right off the bat.
Yeah. One of the things that I've learned, and this has kind of become a habit, is different events that I go to specifically with like, say, Jeff C. or like Lou Mongello, people like that, where we're like, well, the networking, the air quotes networking party, although who can really do that with the music so loud you can't hear your voice, let alone the person next to you. We realized, oh, we're going to have our own old person networking or quiet networking party.
Love that.
We start reaching out to those people and saying, hey, so the plan is tonight we're going to meet here at this lobby, and then we're going to go over to this sushi restaurant or something. And then we're at a table of people that feel free to invite an extra one or two people that we don't all know, but then we can make them feel comfortable. And because we've got kind of that 50-50 vibe of, I know these people, but I don't know them, but I'm in a safe space because
I love
one of my friends is there, you know, three, 4 of my friends, you know, it's kind of been that kind of comfort group date networking kind of a situation that we've set up.
I also want to remind people that when it comes to social anxiety, this is what I mean when I say take responsibility. So let's say that you have an event and I wasn't invited to your dinner. I like dinner. I want to go. I like, you know, hanging out with you. You need to be willing to say, hey, can I come?
Yes.
Because there are so many times, and I'm thinking back on all of these events that I didn't do that because I just assumed in my head, oh, they don't like me, or I don't fit in, or I'm not one of the group, or whatever, rather than just asking, hey, you know what? I would prefer to go to a dinner than go to this networking event. Can I come too? Like, we have to be willing to be brave in order to find those connections, because I know that I'm going to thrive in a situation like you mentioned, where I know some people were sitting down. There's something for me about sitting down versus standing up that makes me feel more comfortable. So if you know that it's going to be a better space for you than going to a networking event where the music's too loud and you don't know anybody, then you need to be willing to say, hey, could I come?
And people have done that with our meetups.
I love that.
And don't always know if there's enough room. So it's quick. Hey, how many do we already have? How many did we make the reservation for? Other than those logistics, you're totally welcome to come. Yes.
Well, also, I mean, you're not the type of person to be like, no, you can't come. You would probably say something like, you know what? We're at a cap for the table, but why don't we catch lunch tomorrow? You know, so asking, it doesn't just mean like for the event. Maybe it could be for the next night or for lunch. Because I just know that there's so many times at networking events where I just, especially when I first started going, where I'm like, everybody knows each other. They've known each other for years. And, you know, that's
what it feels
great.
like.
That's what it feels like in our heads, right? Because I know that, like, when it comes to social anxiety, they all have roots. I know that my root is definitely fear of rejection. I am super sensitive to rejection. It hurts like a knife to the heart. And so I will do pretty much anything than get rejected by another human being.
Yeah.
Right.
Sometimes it takes those big asks, those big, bold
It takes a big role. And also, I mean, when I think about the events, you know, social media marketing world is coming up soon. That came from an ask of mine. You know, I asked Mike years ago if I could speak, and he said no to me. I'm standing there like so excited, and he's like, no, you're not ready. And that could have, as somebody with social anxiety, and it did for about 24 hours, ruin me. But I looked back and I was like, wait a second. He didn't say no. He said, you're not ready yet. And so if you start to pay attention to what people are actually saying, rather than just like tuning out and be like, they said no, they rejected me. Then I was like, okay, well, let me email him and see what he meant by I'm not ready yet. And he actually gave me a list of all the things that I needed to do. And I went out and did them. And then I was ready and I was invited to come. And I think that comes to like all events, right? I mean, if you want to speak, there's so many people that are listening that want to speak. How do you speak? Stop waiting for somebody to ask you. Even if you have social anxiety, if you know that you're going to rock it on stage, go and pitch yourself. Ask, right?
Oh, yeah. Totally. There's been ones where I spoke at their first event and even their second event, and then I'd keep submitting, and then over time didn't get in, and I was like, oh, what's going on here? They don't like me. And then I kind of was like, hey, actually, it's kind of fun to attend this event without having to speak. It's more fun to not have the pressure of speaking on that event anymore. So, and then moved on and went and spoke at other events.
I love that. I think that it's especially true for women that are listening. One of the very first events that I spoke at, the event planner told me, she goes, Michaela, I get so many calls and messages from men that want to speak at my events. You are like maybe the third woman that's ever approached me with a pitch. I was shocked. I was at a point in my career where I had nothing to lose. But that always kind of stuck in my mind as a reminder that you have to ask. And sometimes it's going to be a no, and the no isn't crippling. It's the regret of like not going to the event, of not asking, of not doing, because the reality is that when we talk about networking isn't an optional thing. You cannot grow in your life, in your career, without the help of other people, right? So we need each other. So it's not optional, but what is optional is finding ways that make sense for you, whether it's going and meeting people at coffee shops, you know, playing video games and talking to somebody through your headphones, finding whatever ways. I know there's some people, a friend of mine, she goes on hikes with people because for her, it's movement. She's one of those people that talks on the phone and while they're walking, right? So being really curious about those types of things, you can choose how you interact with people, but you can't choose to not interact with people at all.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think one of the things that even this book being in existence was part of you having nothing left to lose and just asking a bold ask of somebody that was online, correct?
I started on LinkedIn. I started because A, I was a job seeker, but B, I had social anxiety. So I wasn't going to the traditional networking events and trying to meet people and land a new job that way because I was too nervous to do that. And so I started creating on LinkedIn, and I reached out to an idol of mine, Scott Stratton, and he had this amazing podcast that I was listening to every single day. And again, like you mentioned, I have nothing to lose. So I go, this is where I am. I'm at a crossroads in my career. I don't know where to go from here. Right. So it's an ask, but it's a very small ask of like, what would you do if you were me? And didn't think that he would respond. The next morning, I wake up to a message from him basically saying like, screw that company. There's so much more to come. Can I send you a box of books? Like, it'll have my books. But I actually originally thought it was just going to be his books. And I was like, oh my God, absolutely. So I get this huge box from Amazon, and it has some of Scott's books. And then it also has books from other authors. One of the books was from Anne Handley, which is my Bible. Everybody Write. She's amazing.
Yes.
I read that book and started creating more, writing more articles. A lot of those articles started going viral. I started building my following to the point where I was able to leave my corporate job in 2018 and then start working for myself, helping people do what I was doing on LinkedIn. I had still continued doing that to this day, but the most special part of all of this, it's so crazy now thinking about how everything started. And it's actually the very first one. The very first endorsement on my book is best-selling Wall Street Journal best-selling author of Everybody Writes, Anne Handley, is the very first endorsement on my book. And she was also generous enough to be interviewed for my book as well and shared some amazing tips as an incredible speaker. But all of that happened from just one small LinkedIn message. So when I talk about networking, send a message on LinkedIn today. Go and talk to the barista at the coffee shop. Do these little things, because these little things literally could add up to your idol being the first endorsement on your published book someday, and you just don't know it yet. Anytime I think about it, it always makes me smile that's where I started.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up. I was shocked when I saw that, when I read that post that you had written on LinkedIn, because one, that was a great story. Two, I've been a long time fan of Scott and Allison.
It's amazing.
And was really excited to see that they had brought their podcast back recently.
Yeah.
I've been missing you guys.
I know. And Scott's amazing. And he was such an inspiration for me when I started creating content too, because I really wanted to create content that was like genuine and honest. And I think that he's like just such a trailblazer when it comes to all that stuff. And definitely when it comes to that story, like seeing his comment of like, that's what I'm talking about. Like, it's just I'm going to cry because it's just such a full circle moment. And it's so incredible when you think of how kind strangers can be. And one of the things that I want to say, because we live in a world that feels so divided right now. And if you go online, and I know this because I can go on social media and I feel like the world is ending, empathy is dead, like everything is terrible, right? The best thing for me has been this challenge, because when I stepped outside of my house and I was able to look people in the eyes and talk to them, I was like, that's not the world. This is the world. Like when you look somebody in the eye, you can see like there's still humanity. We're still connected. We're still both human. And so that's part of the reason too why connecting is so important. There are so many mental health benefits of even these, they're called like micro interactions. So going and talking to the barista can actually decrease your levels of loneliness, make you feel happier over time. And so that's something that I wanted to point out, because I know that we're living in a time where it can feel Like, well, why would I want to go and network with people? Everybody sucks, right? But when you get out of your house and you go and you talk to people and you have genuine conversations, I promise you, it is so different than what you see online. And I think that sometimes we desperately need the reminder that strangers can be incredible towards you. I mean, strangers have changed my life.
Yes, yes. And it's so important. And that's why I thought this is a perfect book for a lot of people who don't get to benefit from that, to finally benefit from that, be able to get past some of those hurdles and strengthen those muscles and really step into some of those genuine human interactions that then counteract the scroll of negativity that we often see.
It's like the doom scroll, right? And people are so different online, and the loudest people are the ones that are commenting and all of that stuff. But there are so many people that are not online or are quiet online that are so kind and so generous. I really think that this is the antidote. The most surprising thing for me with the whole challenge was that I did it during a time, and this wasn't intentional, but I did it during a time that I normally have like peak seasonal depression. You know, the days are short. I live in Canada, so we just had a blizzard the other day. It's depressing at this time. I have not had even a whisper, and this is the first year in like years, as far back as I can remember, that my mental health has been so good. And I really and truly believe it's because I went to the library and talked to the librarian. And then the next day I went to a restaurant and ran into a manager who had seen my post on LinkedIn. These little interactions really counteracted the feelings of loneliness that, at least for me, really come on strong this time of year.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm in that boat as well. And this season has been definitely a lesser season for some of these reasons.
Even get on a Zoom, you know, if you have a snowy day outside, where are you located?
I'm in Indiana, so I'm about 3 hours south of Chicago.
Do you guys get snow then?
Oh, we've got snow right now.
Okay. Yeah, that's an easy, like, I mean, it's easy to look outside and be like, I'm not going anywhere today, right? And I had so many people during, excuse me, my challenge that said, just the fact that you were able to get out of your house should be enough for the challenge today, Michaela. But on those days that the snow is high or it's raining really hard and you don't want to leave your house, find somebody online, post in a group on LinkedIn, post on Facebook, say, hey, does anybody want to chat right now? Get in those hours. It's kind of like getting in your steps every day. Even if you're not able to go outside, if you commit to yourself that you're going to do 10,000 steps, I have friends that will do laps around their kitchen island, do your laps around a kitchen island. But networking, that would be like set up a Zoom call, because trust me, just having that time where you don't talk about work. And that's what I would actually tell people when you start doing these challenges, make it so you're not bringing up work. And that was hard for me.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many times that I wanted to lead with that because that's what I'm most comfortable with. But commit to at least having one conversation where you do not bring up work one time.
Ooh, that's tough, but that's healthy. And some of the best connections, even with work networking type people that are going to come in, you strengthen the bond because of the non-work things you're talking about. So,
well, we work with people that we know, like, and trust, right? And so I think that a bunch of us, like, we try to skip ahead some of the steps. Can I build trust in like 20 minutes? No, you got to take people out on a first date first. You need to see if you get along. And trust me that people, by doing this, the amount of business that I got out of this networking challenge, by the way, was insane. The amount of calls that I've gotten, the amount of contracts that I've booked, just because people will find ways to work with people that they like.
Yeah.
And in an age where everything is like run by AI, guess what? The only thing that we've got left is our personality and our story.
Us humans got to stick together.
We do. No shade to the robots if they're listening.
Yes. I, for one, can't wait to network with AI. Yes. Never mind. Anyways. Well, Michaela, it's been awesome talking with you. It always is. I want to push people to where they can find out more, jump in on, connect with you on LinkedIn, grab the book, all that kind of good stuff. Yeah. So let's send them over there.
So the book is called No Fear Networking, A Guide to Building Connections for the Socially Anxious Professional. It's available everywhere. Amazon Canada, Amazon US, Barnes & Noble, Indigo, pretty much any bookstore on the planet has access to a copy of this book, which is fantastic. the audio version, because I've had people ask about that, the audio version of this is coming out in April. Unfortunately, it's not voiced by me, not my choice, but I know people are waiting on that because they are audiobook listeners. If you are interested in the challenge, you can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Michaela, Michaela, Alexis. I am currently working on a challenge that other people can take and do, and I'm really excited about it.
Nice.
So watch for that. But if you want to see all of the adventures that I went on, you can check out my newsletter or my LinkedIn post to see how it all went down, and follow to keep in touch and take your own challenge as well.
Awesome. I will link up to everything you just said in the show notes for this episode. And thank you, Michaela. I'm so glad we finally got this done. We had to reschedule a couple times. So
Yay.
We made it. We did it.
I'm so excited. Yes. And thank you so much for having me.
Well, that's another podcast crossed off your listening to-do list. I hope that you enjoyed listening in on this conversation with Michaela Alexis about networking. And we covered a lot, but there is so much more in the book. So make sure to check out the show notes at beyondthetodolist.com, or go to the show notes in your podcast player app of choice. The link for the book is there, as well as to connect with Michaela on LinkedIn, her primary social network. You can also connect with me there as well. And if you found this episode helpful, would you do me and Michaela a favor and share this episode with somebody that you know needs to hear it? Heck, go and share it on LinkedIn. Tag us in it. We will share it. We will comment. We will engage with you. Thank you so much for doing us that favor. Thanks again for sharing. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next episode.